In this video, we'll introduce two general approaches to the justification of patents. The first approach, or theory, is a utilitarian justification of patents. The idea here is that the granting of patents is justified because granting monopoly rights to creators of certain kinds of goods or ideas increases overall happiness. The reason why this is supposed to increase overall happiness is simple. If it weren't for patents, then arguably many of the goods that are currently patented wouldn't exist. Without the protections afforded by patent law, creators could not be sure that the work that they put into creating a product would be rewarded. Thus, we would find ourselves in a world where people were much less likely to produce goods that could be used to improve our lives. Now, if patents are to be justified on utilitarian grounds, then in order to figure out whether patents should be granted on living organisms or seeds, we must ask, are such patents likely to increase overall happiness? Granting patents like these surely gives companies such as Monsanto incentives to produce better GMOs. But these patents also have potential negative effects. Many opponents of GMOs worry that the increasing use of patented GMOs means that for-profit corporations have an incredible amount of power over our food system, power that could be harmful in the long term. Although Monsanto has stated that it will never sue farmers whose fields are inadvertently contaminated by GMOs, some worry about what would happen if Monsanto changed its mind about this. Another worry is that the incredible profitability of GMO seed decreases the amount of money available for research on non-patented seed. Thus, over time, the growth of GMOs will make it harder and harder for farmers to obtain good quality non-patented seed. This too gives Monsanto and other companies significant control over our food system and what farmers plant. Those are some of the considerations that must be weighed if we are to decide whether patents on living organisms or seeds can be justified on utilitarian grounds. Perhaps, though, the utilitarian justification of patents isn't the right account. It's not the only justification that's been offered. A different sort of justification for patents appeals to Lockean considerations. In his second treatise of government, the philosopher John Locke provided a famous and influential account of property. Locke held that God gave the world to mankind in common. Thus, in the initial state of things, there was no private property, aside from the fact that every person exercises a right of self-ownership. But Locke held that there's a way for people to acquire private property. That is, to take things out of the commons and to make them their own. Locke writes, "Whatsoever that he removes out of the state that nature hath provided and left it in, he hath mixed his labor with, and joined to it something that is his own, and thereby makes it his property." In other words, Locke says that by laboring on something, say a piece of land that is unowned, you can make that land yours, since you've mixed your labor with that thing, and you own your labor. To apply this idea to justify patents, we could say that Monsanto owns their labor, and they've mixed their labor with the organisms that they've created, say Roundup Ready canola. Thus, they own Roundup Ready canola and therefore have the right to prevent other people from using it without authorization. There are a number of questions to ask about this sort of justification for patenting living organisms. One of the most important questions was raised by the philosopher Robert Nozick. Locke's theory seems to be that I can make something unowned mine by mixing my labor with it because I own my labor, and therefore anything my labor is mixed with is mine. But Nozick asked, why does mixing something that I own with something else result in me gaining property? Why doesn't it result in me losing property? Nozick writes, quote, "If I own a can of tomato juice and spill it in the sea so that its molecules, made radioactive so I can check this, mingle evenly throughout the sea, do I thereby come to own the sea, or have I foolishly dissipated my tomato juice?" Examples like this show that a simple Lockean theory of property acquisition is probably too simplistic to provide an account even of acquisition of non-intellectual property. But there does seem to be something to the Lockean theory. There does seem to be something right about the idea that if I labor, say, on a plot of unowned land, then I gain some sort of right to that land, which others who didn't labor on it lack. Similarly, there seems something right about the idea that if I labor intensely to create a new kind of computer processor, then I have a right to produce and distribute computer processors of that kind, a right that other people lack. The question then becomes, what generates these rights? And is it possible to tell a story about what generates these rights, which shows that patents on seeds or living organisms are justifiable? These questions need to be answered if one is to justify GMO patents on the basis of Lockean considerations.